Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here again. Our ninth webinar, the collaboration between the North American Millets Alliance, the Feast Lab at the University of Missouri, the Center for Regenerative Agriculture, also at the University of Missouri. And as I said, this is our ninth webinar of 2023 in the International Year of Millets. We have what should be a really popular topic today. It's the title of our webinar is Drink Up Millet Beverages, Alcoholic and Non-Alcoholic. And we have two really dynamic and accomplished women as our speakers today. Our first speaker will be Twila Souls, who is CEO and Maltstress at Grouse Malt House, who will present exploring millet as a craft brewing ingredient. One of the grains they use is proso millet. And then we'll have Sujala Balaji, who is engineer, entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Rain-Fed Foods, who will present on millet's role in the next generation plant-based food and beverage innovation. One of their products is a milk from millet. So not really should be really interesting for those of us who have ever had artisanal or commercialized millet-based beverages. This is a real treat for us. So when we, I'm going to give a longer introduction to each presenter first before their presentation. So first, more on Twila Souls. As I said, Grouse Malt House, Maltstress, and CEO. Twila earned an undergraduate degree in nutrition from Miami University, a master's degree in food science and food safety from Colorado State University. And for graduate studies, she focused on malting and brewing science and bioactive and probiotic compounds. With a passion for craft beer and a gluten intolerance, challenged her to experiment with malting and brewing with gluten-free grains as a student. She founded Grouse Malt House in 2013. It's a craft malting company dedicated to supplying gluten-free ingredients to the craft brewing industry. Twila is also a founding board member of the North American Craft Maltsters Guild. You learn something new every day. Didn't know that existed. So we'll have a 15-20 minute presentation by each presenter today, Twila and then Sujala, and then 15-20 minutes for discussion and questions. So take it away, Twila. We're really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
All right. Hello. Good afternoon where I am, which is in Wellington, Colorado. Thank you for the introduction and for the invite to speak and to share here today. I am the co-founder and Maltstress and CEO of Grouse Malt House, located in Wellington, Colorado. And I have been malting millets for over a decade now. Grouse was founded in 2013, but I've been experimenting with making beer and malts with millet since 2009. In 2009, I was a graduate student at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, and I happened to take an elective class, and it was a fermentation science class. In that class, we were learning about craft beer and what it took to make a great tasting craft beer. And we were also touring some of the breweries that Fort Collins has to offer. And when we're touring some of these breweries, I noticed that a colleague of mine wasn't drinking any of the beer. And I had recently moved to Colorado, and it was exposed to all of these great tasting craft beers, and I fell in love with craft beer. And I asked her, do you not enjoy beer? And she said, I actually love beer, but I was just diagnosed with celiac disease, and I just want to feel good. And so I don't want to drink any beer with gluten in it. I knew about celiac disease. I have an undergraduate degree in nutrition, and I said, well, there's got to be some gluten-free beer options out there, right? And she said, yes, there were, but there weren't very many options, and they really didn't taste very good. I'll share a little bit more about why they didn't taste very good a little bit later on, but I was really struck by her passion and dedication to being gluten-free and passing on all of these delicious beers that I could drink at the time. Little did I know that I could benefit from a gluten-free diet, and I've embraced a gluten-free diet for the past 10 years now, and am much better for it. The reason that I am gluten-free is because I have an autoimmune disease. And in my quest to cure that autoimmune disease naturally and not take pharmaceuticals, it did lead me to trying a gluten-free diet, kind of hand in hand with malting and brewing with gluten-free grains. And very much an advocate for a gluten-free lifestyle. I also wanted to plug the Craft Maltsters Guild. So in 2013, in addition to starting Grouse, I also helped co-found the Craft Maltsters Guild. It is a thing. If you'd like to learn more about craft malting and that movement, please check out the North American Craft Maltsters Guild website. I wanted to clear up a little bit of confusion because there are some differences when we're talking about gluten-free beer and gluten-reduced beer. So even back in 2009, there were some gluten-reduced beer options. Oh, I skipped one. There we go. Gluten-reduced beer. Gluten-reduced beer is made from gluten-containing ingredients. And these beers cannot be labeled either on their packaging or on their menu that they're listed on as gluten-free, because they're not truly gluten-free as upheld by the TTB and at least in the US our standards. That is not the case in other countries in the EU, for example. So we've got gluten-reduced beer, and then we have gluten-free beer. Gluten-free beer is made with gluten-free ingredients, such as millet. And then we also have dedicated gluten-free beer. So these are made at dedicated gluten-free breweries that all they make is gluten-free beer. And here's some examples of gluten-free breweries that make some great tasting products with Grouse malts. So in 2009, when I Googled gluten-free beer and what breweries were using at the time to make a gluten-free beer were mostly syrups, sorghum syrup, rice syrup, or honey, tapioca in a syrup or a powdered form, Belgian candy syrups. These were used in order to get the starches that then brewers could convert into alcohol. These and also unmalted grains, unmalted millet or rice, but unmalted grains and syrups have some limitations. In brewing, you need enzymes and you need a certain macro and micronutrient profile in order to make a high quality product. These ingredients, the syrups and the unmalted grains, they also have some significant flavor limitations. And I didn't mess around with these ingredients very long before I realized that there was an opportunity to increase the ingredients that were available to make gluten-free beer. So Grouse Malt House, this is our why. We believe that all people deserve access to high quality food and beverages, regardless of an allergy or intolerance. So we make gluten-free malts. Millet is the primary grain that we malt. And I use the word grain kind of loosely here because buckwheat, which is in the upper left-hand corner, and quinoa are not technically grains, they're pseudo cereals. And we also do malt some corn as well as certified gluten-free oats. Grouse is also this is an old image for the certified gluten-free, but we are certified gluten-free as well. Here's some beautiful pictures of Prozo in the field once before it starts to dries out, and once going through with the cutting down the millet into windrows. So Grouse primarily sources grain within 200 miles of the malt house. We work within the region that we are in, and we work with a host of different farmers. Even though millet and buckwheat, et cetera, are inherently gluten-free grains, it's really important for us to, in order to make a high quality gluten-free malt, we need to start with high quality seed. And for us, that looks like monitoring and testing for the moisture of our incoming millet or other grains, the protein, the germination vigor and capacity, and the gluten-free aspect. There's a lot of cross contact that can happen on the farm in the planting, in the harvesting, in the storage, and the handling. So we work pretty closely with our farmers to make sure that the grain we're going to be bringing into our malt house is truly gluten-free. And for us, that doesn't mean really testing below 20 ppm, because we know that testing is really only as good as the samples that you're getting. So for us, gluten-free means 0 visible seeds of any contamination. So if there's a wheat seed in our millet, we don't accept the load. Again, I've had the pleasure of working with many farmers, and the farmer that when I was a student back in 2009, trying to get access to some naturally grown and locally grown gluten-free grains, I cold called Gene Hediger, and the Hediger family has a very large millet growing operation in Colorado, just east of where we are. Grouse actually started on their farm, and so just wanted to give a shout out to the Hediger family. So for malting requires specialized equipment. It's very different from brewing equipment. In malting, we're basically mimicking what the farmer does in the field, but on a larger scale and in a very controlled environment. So I wanted to give some examples of what malting equipment can look like. This is called a salad in box. So you can see that it's got some turners in malting, especially in the germination process. So we've got steeping, which is soaking the grain, germinating, which is the seed is germinating, and then kilning, which we dry down the seed, we halt that germination process. So malt that we sell is a dried, is a dry grain. In some aspects, it can look very similar to that raw grain, but internally it's gone through quite the change. And we also have the opportunity to change the color and the flavor profile of that grain in the malting process. So the salad in box, we're rotating the grain by these stirrers that move up and down a bed. And then we also have a drum style system, and that is the type of equipment that Grouse has. So here's a peek inside of our malt house. We have germination kiln drums. So the way that we move the grain is that whole vessel rotates. So a little bit more about the products that Grouse makes. We make a wide variety. So yes, we make millet malt, but we make a pale millet malt and a Munich millet malt, Vienna, a wide variety of millet malts. And that is really important because People like to drink a Pilsner or a light lager or a Doppelbock or a stout. There's a wide variety of beer styles. And in order to make a wide variety of beer styles, you need to have in your arsenal of ingredients a wide variety of flavor and color profiles of the malt, of the grist bill that you're making, that you're using to make your brew. So it was really important when we started out in for Grouse that we could not only malt grain, but we could also roast grain. So we use a modified coffee roaster and do some roasting as well. So you can see in this, in these pictures that we have a spectrum of different colors and flavors. So in the brewing world, we talk about color in a few different ways, in a few SRM or Levabond, in a scale. So we make malt that is a 1 degree, a very light color, all the way to a 350 SRM scale. So a wide range of color and also flavor. So we have malts that are slightly bready, and then we have our Goldfinch is extremely bready, biscuity, all the way to roasted chocolate, nutty, a wide variety of flavor and color profiles. And for our malts, every batch that we release, it's very important for us and for our customers so that they can make a high quality, repeatable beer that we're hitting our mark batch after batch for our different brands. So every batch of malt that we make, we are testing that in kind of a tea format. We call it a hot steep, that we are testing the color and the flavor and making sure that it is on brand. Let's see. I think I kind of breezed through that pretty quickly. Let me see if I missed anything. And happy to field.
We do have, we do have three questions, Twila, if maybe we could slip these in. Okay, the first question is from David Brenner. Would you want brown hull proso millet to get the color? I think I'm reading it as well. You understand? Would you want to use brown hull proso millet to get the color? Is that the question, David?
Yeah, that's the question.
Okay.
There exist brown hulled types that aren't used commercially, but they're around.
We have never used, we have experimented with some different varieties, red proso, for example. And also I can speak to this in buckwheat, right? That hull, that very dark hull of the buckwheat, that doesn't impart any color in the wort that would be made from it. That color, that pigment in a hull primarily, especially, is pretty inert, and it doesn't contribute any color in the wort or the beer. So it's really in the malting and the roasting process where the internal starches are develop color, is where we get the color, not really from the hull.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have actually 4 questions from Sergio Nunes de Arco. Pretty crafty there, Sergio, to fit 4 questions into 2. But the first one is, how do you test germination in millet? Does the hulling impact germination?
There are some seeds, some seeds that can germinate without the hull. White proso, in my experience, is not one of them. So we do use cleaned millet, but it has not had the hull removed. It is important for that hull to be intact, for the seed to be very much intact, for the germination to happen, and for the germination to happen as well as we would need to in the malting process.
Mm-hmm. The second 2-part question is, how do you sample for incoming product, and what size sample do you analyze for wheat contamination?
That's a great question. Our screening of our seed, our incoming seed, starts in the field. So that's one of the reasons that we work with local farmers, is so that we can be on site, we can have that field tour, we can make sure, ask those questions, get our eyes on the farmers' processes to ensure that they're avoiding cross-contamination, cross-contact in the different stages of farming and grain storage. For analyzing samples, I guess it depends on where. If I'm out in the field and scanning for the rogue wheat or rye plants, that can look a certain way. If I'm there when they're offloading the truck into a bin, taking a grain probe, looking at a large sample of grain. So it's not like we're just saying, hey, send over a 5-pound representative sample. It's much more in depth than that.
Okay, we might as well go through these there while we're at it, and if there's follow-up later, we can get to it. But the next question is from Alyssa Walters. Is dusty grain ever an issue causing cloudiness?
Alyssa, I'm not sure if you can. I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Maybe cloudiness in causing the cloudiness in that first picture that I shared. Is I'm not sure what or cloudiness in a beer.
I don't know, Alyssa. Is Alyssa still here?
For the record, that it was just a cloudy day from that.
Oh.
We have no doubt moving around grain is dusty, but we have put a lot in place to I guess I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen. We have put a lot of procedures, equipment in place to cut down on dust when we're moving around grain or when we're packaging. So
Okay, Alyssa clarified, she's talking about dusty grain leaching into the liquid. I'll go to Andrew Forrest's question. First of all, great presentation from Andrew, says Twila. And how do your malts compare to barley malts with regard to mash times to achieve target SG?
that stands for SG is specific gravity. So what that's referring to is kind of essentially how much sugar, how much extract can we get out of those grains, and then how much ABV are we going to get out of those grains. So compared to barley malt, it depending on your mashing procedure, it tends to be about a 15% reduction, although we've seen it is possible to not get to have it be very comparable to barley malt, depending upon your brew system. Times and temperatures do change a little bit if you're able to, might get a little technical, but Andrew, it seems like you brew. Millet and buckwheat have a higher gelatinization temperature. So you do want to get up to ideally 165 in your mash. That can be a little difficult for your beta amylase. It'll degrade at those temperatures. So we really do lean into, even though our malts have enzymes, we do, in order to get the efficiency that you're looking for, especially in a commercial brew system, we do recommend exogenous enzymes in order to get up into that the efficiency that you would expect with a barley malt.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question from Andrew. I think it's, do your inbound millets have protein specifications similar to barley malts?
We do. Our millet typically is in the 9.5, 10.5% protein range, and we like to stick within that range for our incoming millet. Okay,
thank you. And from Gary Whitegraph, what moisture do you prefer farmers harvest and store proso so that it best meets your process?
Definitely below 12.5%. Usually in our neck of the woods, that's not hard to do, and to maintain. We have not had good luck with drying of millet. You know, if a farmer was to dry it in a drying bin, that does tend to negatively affect the germination capacity of that grain. So below 12.5% moisture.
Okay, and finally, a comeback question from Alyssa. Do you ever, Alyssa, I'm sorry. Do you ever have to combat bitter flavors from gluten-free grains?
No, at least for millet, buckwheat, the grains that I'm familiar with malting, I definitely would not say that there is an inherent bitterness to those grains. Gluten-free beer does have kind of it has had a bitter stigma. Some people are way more susceptible to picking up on the sorghum syrup bitterness. I'm very susceptible to that sorghum bitterness. But malted, millet, buckwheat, the grains that we use do not have an inherent bitterness to them. So, and I'm happy to share a little bit about, so the malting process, we make the malt, it's a dried grain. And then what brewers do is they crack it open and crush it, and then mix that with water and extract that liquid, which is called wort, to make the beer. So maybe that clears up the dustiness a little bit, maybe. I see the next question, which is, do you want to?
I didn't see another question. I'm sorry. Was there another one? There's a comment, I think.
Gotcha. Okay.
We do want to leave some room for Sujala. So if you have anything more to say for now, Twila, please do. And are you ready, Sujala, to present? Okay, let me give you a little brief introduction. Everybody's read the little blurb and maybe the attachment that was sent around, but I'll reread it. Sujala Balaji, our next presenter, is CEO of Rainfed Foods. Before I continue, thank you, Twila. You're just incredibly knowledgeable, and I'm sure there'll be more questions. Okay, back to Sujala. Sujala is an engineer and food scientist turned entrepreneur with 15 plus years of experience in the food and dairy industry, leading innovation and product commercialization for companies of all sizes. Deeply passionate about addressing climate change through the creation of biodiverse and regenerative food systems, she founded Rainfed Foods in 2020. Rainfed is the world's first food tech startup focused on transforming underutilized climate resilient crops like millets and sorghum into alternative proteins and food ingredients using a proprietary technology platform. Sujala is an active thought leader in the emerging alternative protein sector and is an honoree of Women Building the Future of Food. Thank you, Sujala, for taking the time to be here. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. Twila, thanks for the great presentation. I feel like I learned a lot about malting and brewing today than the rest of my life. So thanks for educating us. As Jonathan mentioned, I am a food scientist and an engineer by background, and I've been working in the food industry in various capacities for quite some time. But before we dive in and talk about product development, kind of want to introduce myself a little more in the sense of how this idea of me working with using millets in beverages even came about. I grew up in India, for those of you that do not know that, and I moved to Canada to pursue grad studies in food and agriculture. And that's kind of how my academic career started. But after grad school, I worked for startups, and after that for a large dairy company. And during the dairy days, I had an opportunity to work hands-on in not only the product development, but also manufacturing at scale and troubleshooting challenges with ingredient formulation, and also process and technical challenges that came up while processing new ingredients and new products. So while I did that happily, due to my background in India, and my experience living and working in the North American foods, to find a way to one, source ingredients ethically and support smallholder farmers along the way. And around that time is when the UN also introduced the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs 2030. And while looking at the goals, what came obvious to me was that a lot of them are tied to food and agriculture in more ways than one imagines. And by addressing the food system and what we grow and how we grow and how we eat, and how we collaborate, and how can we create products that not only feed the current population and work towards solving some of the global challenges like poverty and hunger, but we can also tackle some of the challenges that are coming in the future, whether it's due to the warming climate or whether it's due to the increasing global population. It is important that we rethink how we feed the world, and that really influenced me to pursue the entrepreneurial journey. And how the millet beverage idea was formed is an interesting one, because for those who grew up in South India, you would know that the first weaning food given to babies is actually a millet porridge. Usually millets are sprouted for a day or so, and then it's ground and extracted into a liquid, and then cooked with usually peanuts, like in a powdered form. So it's a combination of millets and peanuts, which is high in protein, and that's the first solid food that's given to babies when mothers start introducing solid foods. So that has stayed with me for the longest time, and that thought seeded the idea of being able to create beverages using millets. And none of this should be surprising, because for those of us interested in millets and working in millets, we know that not only are crop yields impacted globally due to climate change, but it's becoming harder and harder to grow what we used to grow, and cost of inputs is rising. So using my dairy experience, I wanted to find a way to solve challenges in the plant-based dairy space, and that hasn't been we spent about 2.5 years in research and development to create a plant-based milk. But when we started, even for someone with a food science background and having worked in the industry, I have to admit that I underestimated the challenges we would encounter, because there hasn't really been a lot of product innovation that involved millets, let alone different varieties of millets, right? Usually in India, it's used in its raw format, and we would cook millets in many different recipes that are very traditional and which involved a lot of cooking techniques and special preparation methods. So for us to be able to turn it into a milk that's ready to drink, that's nutritious and delicious, it took a lot of trials and tribulations, but it first started with identifying the right varieties. As you know, millets come in lots of different varieties, and choosing the right variety for the flavor, for the texture, for the nutritional content. We did a lot of testing and a lot of experimental work to find the right variety. So eventually we ended up using a blend of a few different varieties of millets to create the milk. And not just that, but also to make sure that the supply chain is built in an ethical way and in a sustainable way, where how we source the grains continue to provide opportunities that didn't exist before for farmers, whether it's through, you know, markets that they can export to, or the mode of compensation that they would get and the stability in that. So all of that took a very long time. But thankfully we were able to create a process. So it is a proprietary process. I can't share exactly what varieties of millets we're using, but what we did was we were able to turn it into a liquid concentrate, and it involves enzymatic fermentation process, because the starch does gelatinize very quickly once you start heating. We also tested both the whole millet and the millet flour, because some of the manufacturers that we were working with were not necessarily equipped to handle the whole millet. And then the manufacturing partnership changed, and we had to find different types of manufacturers. And one could handle only whole millets, one can handle flour, some can handle both. So we had to figure out ways to adapt our processing to the manufacturer's needs. So not just that, but also I have come to learn over the last few years that infrastructure doesn't necessarily exist, at least in the US and Canada, to develop beverages very small scale. It's either you know, bench scale, where you pay a research lab tens of thousands of dollars to develop something, and then they will develop it in a bench scale, meaning, you know, 1 liter or less format, or there is large manufacturing plants who can, you know, do thousands of liters. Usually the minimum volume they can run in a day is around 25,000 liters. So there's just no in between to experiment or to develop the product and test the sensory profile or test the nutritional profile. So we had to get really, really creative in how we approached product development. If somebody wants to chat more details on that, I'm happy to anytime later, but won't go into details as to all the steps involved in creating this concentrate. So the concentrate we developed can be formulated into a lot of different applications, and we're starting with milk. Hopefully you can see this. So this is our first product, rain-fed milk, which has 8 grams of protein and same calcium as cow's milk. We did add a little bit of pea protein to boost the nutritional content of the milk, because millets are technically cereal, pseudo cereal, not a legume. So the protein content is not as high as a soy or pea, for example. But consumers that want to switch from cow's milk to plant milk, some of the important factors that they consider are protein, calcium, in addition to taste. So we wanted to give them everything that they're looking for, so it's easier for someone who wants to make the switch. And that's what we were able to achieve. And then that concentrate can also be dried and turned into a millet milk powder. And that can be formulated into lots of different applications, but these are the infant nutrition, baked goods, and protein bars are some of the ones that we're testing out at the moment. Our milk is ready to be commercialized. We're going to launch in Toronto in the next few weeks, because that's where we're based at the moment. But the milk powder can be sold as an ingredient to other food companies. And there is also another ingredient that we're developing, which is a millet protein concentrate, because currently that market is really crowded by soy and pea. There is not a lot of diverse ingredients in that space, and there is a need for more diverse ingredients because the market for plant-based proteins and plant-based milk is continuing to grow year over year, and it is expected to stay that way. And I'm sure even from our own consumption patterns and some of the people that we have known I'm sure either yourself or someone are trying plant-based milks and plant-based meats more than we have had in the last 10 years or so. So that trend, we're going to continue to see an increase, and it's not going anywhere. So it is important that we tap into the growing demand for the plant-based foods, and by incorporating millets, we not only boost the cultivation and production of millets, but also that we move the needle forward on all the other issues that I've touched on before. As I mentioned, we spent a lot of time in R&D. We started the company in 2020 with a small proof of concept, and then over the last couple of years, beverage manufacturing is very expensive, so we had to raise some external capital to develop the product and do the experimental work. And we've been able to secure contract manufacturing, which was one of our biggest challenge, I would say. Second next to developing the product, finding a manufacturer who can actually produce the product with the quality that we expected, and someone that has capacity, because the space of plant-based milk is growing. A lot of manufacturers are at capacity. They don't want to take on new clients because they can't keep up with the demand for their existing clients. So that really delayed us by actually 9 months, but thankfully we found a partner who's really great to work with and has the capacity for us. So we ran a first production run early this year for about 6,000 liters, and that's what you're seeing right now. And we launched at a Future Food Tech conference in March, where we served the milk on the breakfast menu for over 1,000 people, and received incredible feedback from industry folks to large corporates to manufacturing partners. And then we also launched at a church in Vancouver, and we won People's Choice Award among 800 exhibitors, and sampled our milk. Retailers are impressed. It works really well in all sorts of applications, whether you want to drink a cup of the milk, or if you want to put it in your coffee or cereal, or if you want to cook with it. It works well in all applications. And we also demoed the product at a consumer show, and it's interesting to watch consumers' face change, because I don't know if anyone has tried to drink a cup of oat milk or almond milk. You just can't, because it's not it's not very palatable when you're just drinking it. It works well in a coffee, but you just can't drink a cup of it. So when people tried our milk, they expect it to taste bad, but they're pleasantly surprised by the fact that it actually tastes good. So we received great feedback from consumers as well. So as a next step, we're about to launch in cars and retail over the next few weeks, and continue to work on our applications. So that's a bit of a summary, but I don't know how much detail one would want me to go into in terms of our development work. I can share if anyone has any specific questions. I will do my best to answer.
There's a couple.
I see a question here.
Right. Yeah, go ahead. Can you see them? Can the rain-fed milk be
I
from
see a
Karen?
question. Can the milk be fermented into yogurt? Yes, it can. We actually we're not going to launch yogurt ourselves, but we're hoping to partner with a yogurt company that's interested, and will supply them the milk base if they would like to move forward with that. Only because it's a perishable product, and that's a separate category on its own. There is a lot of complexities involved in bringing it to market. So we want to kind of focus on one at a time.
Excellent. And Gary has two questions, Sujala. One is, what millets do you blend? And the second question, does your millet milk require refrigeration, or can it be stored on grocery
Right.
shelves?
Yes, that's a good question. We can't disclose what millets we're using in our blend because that is a proprietary info. But it is, so this format that you're seeing right now, this is a 1 liter shelf stable milk. So this is a Tetra Pak. So this can be stored without refrigeration until it's opened. And then once it's opened, it's good for 7 to 10 days. It's 1 liter. So this is a format that we're launching with, but in future we could launch a 1.75 liter carton that is that's in the refrigerated case.
Great. And Andrew Forrest has a question after saying great presentation, which it was. Did you experience any flavor or texture issues with UHT processing into Tetra Paks?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we experienced the flavor issues even before we went into processing. I guess they would have existed even whether it's HDST or UHT, but those were some of the things that we worked on while developing the beverage. So we have some pre-treatments even at the raw material stage with the grain that we have that eliminates or off flavors and neutralizes off flavors before it enters the processing plant. So we have like a 2-stage processing component, both at the sourcing level and at the manufacturing level to improve upon the flavor. And then texture issues, yeah, that's also a big one for us to overcome. You would notice that pretty much in every plant milk that you can find in the market right now, there is a lot of stabilizers that are used, whether it's carrageenan, xanthan gum, blend different gums, but we do not have any gum in our ingredient label. We were able to tap into the properties in millets to give us the right consistency that we want. And the consistency is very similar to a 2% milk. The mouthfeel is very similar to a 2% as well. So, I mean, UHT in particular didn't necessarily impact the flavor or texture compared to a HDST, but generally speaking, those were big issues that we did a lot of work on in resolving and getting a finished product that tastes good.
Wow, no shortage of questions. Here's another one. Sergio Nunez Darko asked, what was protein and starch solubility in the millet varieties a consideration?
Yeah, absolutely. Protein, definitely. Starch solubility, I would say we pretty much did every millet individually to first understand how the extract performs on its own. And then we saw what flavor each of the millet brings, and then we came to a combination of different millets that works well. Protein, starch solubility, what else? Like even fiber, some millets, you can use them as whole, some you can't. So that was also a big consideration. And color was a big one because I mean, my favorite millet is finger millet because for those of you that have consumed it know how delicious it is. I love baking with it or adding it in the pancakes or waffle mixes. It incorporates a beautiful brown color and a flavor note that's similar to chocolate, for example. So, and it's high in calcium. So finger millet has like 5 times more calcium than milk. So I really wanted to use finger millet in our formulation, but it imparted a really dark color, especially in a product like milk. People expected to taste, expected to look like a milk, or at least as close as possible. But the addition of finger millet wouldn't let us do that. It just gave us a really dark brown colored beverage. So unfortunately, we had to remove that from the formulation. So that was all trial and error.
Maybe you'll get back to that with chocolate milk or some kind of thing like that.
Yes, we actually do have a chocolate milk. Yes.
Okay, my colleague Don has a question. Still trying to get at this question. Can you tell us how many types of millets you use?
We have about 4 different varieties in our formulation.
Okay. And he also says he's seen some millet milk powder from companies in India. Do you have any idea how those compare to rain-fed?
I wonder if they are millet milk powders or if it's millet flour, or if it's just a powdered millet. Because I don't think anyone has developed a millet milk powder. It could be a combination of different additives that that makes it a replacement for milk. But I would be very curious to see if there is one. Please share that with me after this meeting. I am not aware of one.
I'll be glad to. Sorry to intervene verbally, but yeah, I'll pass those on to you. There's one out of Australia, and another one which has a Chinese, partly Chinese label. So yeah, there's something going on there, but it seems like they're using some other kind of way of including the ingredients. But thank you.
One more question for Sujala. I have a comment from Joni too about rain-fed, how it tastes great. It's a fantastic product. The flavor is delicious. Myself, I can't wait to try because oat milk and coffee just doesn't work that well. But Gary, no apologies to oat milk. But Gary's question is: have you tried using the gelatin characteristics of millets replace? Is that to replace animal-based gelatins?
There could be a potential there. We haven't necessarily done any work on that. We're trying to stay focused on launching this product and work on one application at a time, but that's definitely an interesting comment. Work could be done as exploratory work. If anyone else is interested in starting a company, there is an idea right there.
Really, that's a good idea. Back to Twila for a second here, and I think we set a record for questions today. It's such a great topic. Twila, are you still there? Can the malted millet be used for non-alcoholic beverage? This is from Don. In Uganda, for example, a traditional malting of finger millet and sorghum makes a beverage called bushera. But the question, can the malted millet be used for a non-alcoholic beverage? There
we go. Yes, it definitely can. There's no products that are commercially available on the market quite yet, but it's definitely in the works.
We still have a few more minutes. Just outstanding presentations, two incredibly dynamic and knowledgeable and talented women entrepreneurs. We still have questions. Gary, did you have one?
Yes, I do. When I was in Turkey a few years ago, the Turkish people no longer grew millet until I reintroduced it over there. But in the wintertime, around New Year's, Christmas, New Year's, there used to be street vendors that would walk around with a millet drink, a warm millet drink that, we would probably say similar, they say it was similar to eggnog. I was wondering if either of you have experience with that type of Turkish drink or maybe Mideastern drink.
I have not, but that sounds like a great idea. What I do want to mention is I wonder if that's very similar to the millet porridge that I used to grow up drinking. So the finger millet porridge was a common breakfast staple in India. This is when I grew up. I don't know if it's still as commonly being consumed these days because of lifestyle changes. But the finger millet is ground very finely, and then it's cooked in either milk or water, and then you can season it with either sugar or even salt if you want like a savory profile. And I would say the consistency is kind of like a hot chocolate. but that's a very common beverage that I remember drinking fondly. And then one application that just came to my mind, this is a friend of mine who is vegan for many years, and so I gave her some millet flour as free samples, and she mentioned making pasta sauce that's kind of creamy with the millet flour, and she said this worked really, really well as a replacement for cashew. So that's I guess that's another idea right there. So I think the versatile nature of the different varieties of millets is just so beautiful and incredibly diverse that there's just so many potential applications that can be done at scale.
Oh boy, this is incredible. Did I miss any questions? Does anybody else have a question out there? Okay. Both of you are really on the avant-garde. You're riding the wave into the future. This is really incredible, and congratulations to all the work you've done, and thank you so much for being here today and for everyone. This was a good turnout, and we really appreciate the time that everyone, both presenters and participants, you participants have put in for this. This is really successful, really a learning experience, inspiring, I should add too. Anybody else want to add anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Don, if I could just add a quick note. Yeah, thank you everybody. These great presentations, great questions, really appreciated. I think this may be the first webinar in the International Year of Millets to focus specifically on beverages. This is a space that has traditional importance in a lot of parts of the world. And there's a lot of future to it as well. So it's really great to have this kind of dialogue going. And I expect that people will be listening to this and hopefully will spur a lot more activity and interest. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. It'll be on YouTube, and then we'll see you again next month for the next webinar.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thanks for the organizers for your continued enthusiasm in hosting these and bringing great people together. I want to say, if anyone wants to chat product development in detail, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to share my learnings and experience.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great rest of the evening and day, and see you next month.
Bye.
Bye-bye.